welcome to my first full-length video. What I want to do on this channel is really talk about my sobriety and how I got to 6 years of sobriety without going to AA. I want to preface this by saying I am not against using AA as a resource. I think it's an excellent resource, and I do have a little bit of regret about not utilizing that community, especially during the first year or so of my sobriety when I was still white knuckling it. So today I want to talk about this coin. This is a 24-hour coin. When you go to AA for the first time since the last time you drank, they give you one of these, and it's basically so you have something to hold on to that says, you know, I have gone this amount of time without drinking. It's one day at a time, and this is day one. So I grew up in a family that had a real culture of drinking and not just alcohol, but other substance abuse as well. A lot of my family smoked pot. However, whether you think it's harmful or not, that's just part of how the family was, and it was definitely illegal, of course, at the time. And I don't want to talk about all of this to, say my family are bad people, because I don't think that they, at their cores, are bad people. But they started letting us drink when we were very young. I have one cousin who's 5 years older than me, and she wasn't usually included in the group. But if you take her out of the equation, I was the oldest. I had a cousin a year younger than me. My sister's a year younger than that. We have a cousin 2 years younger than that, and then the final one was 4 years younger than that. And the first time I remember drinking, or being allowed to drink, I guess, as a child, was when I was either 8 or 9 years old. I was with my cousin and my sister, so the three of us were between the ages of, we'll say, 6 and 9 years old, somewhere in there. And we were at my aunt and uncle's house, and I'm not sure what our family was doing, what the adults were doing, but they didn't want us to be in the house, and they gave us a pint of Hot Damn. It's cinnamon schnapps if you've never had it. It's like the OG Fireball, I guess. And I know a pint's not a lot, but it is for elementary school kids to drink. Anyway, they gave us this pint bottle and sent us outside and told us not to come back in. And I don't really remember what it tasted like, but I do very clearly remember that burning feeling in my throat and in my chest. And I remember just feeling absolutely giddy and so excited, and like I was having so much fun. And that's the moment. Not every addict can pinpoint the moment that they knew they were hooked, but I can, and that was it. And unfortunately for me, that moment came before I was old enough to have the capability of reasoning. I didn't know how physically harmful alcohol was. I had never heard of alcoholism. I had no concept of alcohol poisoning, how dangerous it could be if I drank too much. And in fact, in my mind, if a little bit could make me feel so great and, excited and hyper, a lot would, obviously make me feel a lot more happy and excited and hyper. And, moving on from that day, there were a lot of times that we, especially myself, my cousin, my sister, and then the next younger cousin, were given alcohol to drink and left alone with it with no adult supervision. The youngest cousin, she was significantly younger than us, and she wasn't drinking, but she was there, under the supervision of drunk children. And I have other stories about times that we got drunk and, wandered around in Stanislaus County, California at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, drunk, being a total menace to society. But I think that's a story for another day. What I want to talk about today is where I was in my life when I got this coin, because this is not the first 24-hour coin that I've ever gotten. I've actually gotten many of these. I'm not sure how many, in fact. I started drinking regularly and heavily as a teenager. I would say 15. I was a victim of a groomer starting at 16 years old. My best friend, her cousin, was 10, almost 11 years older than us, and he groomed both of us. For me, it was twofold, because we were romantically involved, and for her, he was, providing her with alcohol and drugs as well, because she and I were usually together. So I was able to get alcohol on a regular basis very young, and he also introduced me to some other drugs that I had a hard time breaking the cycle of. But anyway, I drank heavily. That was my drug of choice, was alcohol. And I knew early on that I drank too much and I had a problem. It would affect my ability to go to work and to make friends and to go out without drinking. And when I got pregnant with my son, I was very young. I was 20, and I turned 21 while I was pregnant. And I did stay sober during my pregnancy, but right after he was born, when I got out of the hospital, I started drinking again. And it's hard to admit that I made decisions that were not only not good for me, but also not good for this other person who's totally dependent on me. So when my son was 4, I went to rehab for a little less than a month, and got one of these, and I got a coin when I graduated, and I had these big grand plans for when I got out, how things were going to be great and I was going to stay sober and everything. But the problem was that it's easy not to drink when you're in a place that has no alcohol, but when I got out, I just went back home to the same house with the same people and the same friends and the same significant other, and I had relapsed within 10 days, and it arguably got worse. There were times that we would drink from the moment that we woke up until the moment we went to bed again, and that unfortunately, that wasn't unusual behavior for us. We did it a lot. We would pay other people to deal with our, adult responsibilities. And even after I left him and moved on, I would get better for a little while, and then it would start again. And it doesn't help that I'm also bipolar, and I was not regularly taking my medication like I should have been. So some self-medication to, help me sleep and things like that. So I did try multiple times to quit drinking. I would go to AA, I would pick up this coin, and then I'd be drinking again. And this one, the point in my life that I was in, I had been trying to stop drinking for a year. I was in a relationship with a person who did not really drink, and he was really supportive of my trying to quit drinking, but unfortunately, relapse is part of recovery sometimes, and when I'd have these weak moments, I would be able to just get on the phone and call my family or call my friends, and I'd be able to go out and I'd be able to drink, and then I'd come home and I'd be drunk and we'd start all over again. And my dad was terminally ill with cancer, and I had been going to AA, regularly, but I still wasn't completely on board, I guess. My heart wasn't all the way in it. But when my dad died, the last drink of alcohol I had was the day after he died, and I got wine drunk with my family, and we cried and, did all that together. And then I went to AA the next day and I got another one of these, and that's this one. This is the one I got 2 days after my dad died. And even then, it was just another day, and it wasn't until that Saturday, the day of my dad's funeral, we had the service, and we then had a wake at my mom's house. And my dad he didn't drink anymore. He had quit drinking 10 years before he died, and he didn't like people drinking around him because he was an alcoholic, and he quit drinking for his health. And there's no wrong reason to get sober, but he didn't embrace the recovery lifestyle necessarily, but he was very serious about not having alcohol at the house and not coming around drunk and things like that. So when we got to the wake, everybody was drinking. It was like a keg party. There was beer and gin and booze and all of these things that were there. And again, I'm not trying to insult my family or anybody that was there. Everybody grieves in their own way. But for me, that was the moment that I knew. I didn't think my dad would have liked that. I didn't think that he would have appreciated it. And in fact, had he been alive, it wouldn't have been allowed for people to just be over and be drinking. So, seeing that was the moment that, it clicked for me that I had to change. Something had to change. I needed to do something different. And so I ended up moving to Florida with my boyfriend. I'm still here in Florida. It's been 6 years, and I just got my 6-year coin. So that's kind of just an introduction to who I am and kind of how this journey got started for me. I'll explain more in other videos, kind of where I hit rock bottom, and I guess where I went from there and how I got to where I am now. And again, I did not utilize AA during my sobriety journey, so I will try to give you some tips that worked for me if you are not going to AA. The goal of this series really is it's twofold. I want to let you know that if I can get sober after a childhood and, almost an entire adulthood of very heavy drinking and substance abuse, you can too. I was active in addiction for almost 20 years before I got sober. And the other goal of this is to let you know that having a higher power does not mean you have to believe in God. And I will talk to you about how I guess reconciled my atheism with the higher power part of AA, and how I navigated, especially that first year, which is still very difficult, how I navigated that without AA. So if any of this is of interest to you, I would really appreciate if you subscribe. I am just getting started, but I plan on trying to make a series of these videos with tips and tricks that have worked for me, and I also want to talk some about my coins. I am very proud of them. So again, if you find any of this of interest, I really appreciate a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.